there. So if you look at where, I see LLMs and computer vision, they're already starting to converge, right? So we've
Okay.
got this the intelligent brain without sight over here. And now we're giving it the eyes, but the eyes also have their own intelligence associated with them. The challenge is, when you get into a grocery store, into the retail world, you've got stores or you've got chains that have 150,000 unique items, right? SKU lines. Not only that, we're becoming more used to that now. Where I should probably personally get more involved is, what are the regulations around it? What are the data privacy rules around it? I think our legislators are still trying to figure that out and catch up. When LLMs first kind of started getting a lot better, everyone said, "Oh, AI, the end is nigh. AI is here, and it's going to gain sentience, and artificial general intelligence is coming."
On this episode of the Restaurant AI podcast, I am joined by Aaron Knape, the Chief Revenue Officer of Amniscient, to unpack one of the least talked about and least understood areas of AI. That is computer vision. While most AI conversations today focus on voice and text, Aaron explains why computer vision is different and why it may be the missing layer that allows AI to finally understand the physical world. From grocery stores and restaurants to manufacturing and security, computer vision gives AI eyes, context, and ground truth data that large language models alone can't provide. Aaron breaks down what computer vision actually is, why it's historically been so expensive and slow to adopt, and why that's finally changing. We also get into the nitty-gritty of LLMs and computer vision, how they act together, edge versus cloud computing, the future of robotics, deepfakes, and why automation isn't just a technology problem, it's an education and implementation problem. But before we dive in, a special thanks to our sponsor, ClearCOGS, because the path to greater profits is always clearer when you know what's ahead. With that, I give you my conversation with Aaron Knape. Aaron, happy to have you on, man.
Glad to be here, Matt. Thanks for having me.
So I have been excited to have this conversation because I talk to people about computer vision. It keeps coming up, but I don't know that much about it. Everything is voice and text today, but computer vision's this thing. So look, give me the rundown on what the heck computer vision actually is.
Yeah, I mean, you can start with the basic, definition, right? Computer vision is the ability for a computer to see objects and understand objects around them. To get a little bit more in depth around it, let's just start with LLMs. Make a little comparison, right? I mean,
Okay.
we're a little bit familiar with LLMs, right? They're everywhere. I mean, they permeate almost everybody's lives and every aspect of their lives. Um, but the reason I personally am excited and interested in computer vision and what makes it different to me, especially when you compare it to LLMs, LLMs, they're based on this abstract of human language, right? Like that's it. It's based on things that we made up as people. And it's very good at that. It's very good at managing and manipulating that, understanding language patterns and semantic relationships, et cetera. But then there's computer vision. And with computer vision, you start getting into your physical environment, right? This immutable world, it's the truth, right? An object is an object is an object, no matter where it is. And so it allows us to give computers the ability to understand that physical environment, that spatial context, real world physics. But in the very simplest form, we're just helping computers see what's around them and know what they're looking at.
So my co-founder always brings this up for me. Those verify that you're not a bot, and you have to go click all of the images,
Yeah.
to verify. My co-founder also always likes to tell me, like, they already know by your movement with your mouse whether you're real or not. What you're really doing is just training these computer vision models, and
That's exactly right.
which is incredibly smart. Whoever came up with that, kudos. But secondly, it also kind of makes me think, how far behind is computer vision that we've got a bunch of random people clicking things on the screen to verify? Feels like we're still in the Stone Age.
Yeah. You know what? It's very much it's had a long infancy. I think we'll put it that way, right? Computer vision's been around for a very, very long time. But it's still very nascent in its adoption and in its broader usage because it's expensive. It's really challenging, right? We haven't had the compute power to properly train, um, a computer what 1,000 objects in a retail store looks like, for example, right? Yeah, we can train one to know what a pistachio looks like, and if that pistachio is good, and you've seen it used in agriculture quite a bit. But the ability to grow and scale and expand it is really just becoming a reality here, in the past year or two. So we're definitely at the beginning of the growth phase.
I guess what I don't understand is why is it so hard to do computer vision? Why is it so expensive? What is different about it?
Well, if you think about it, right, language, large language models. Again, we're dealing with, you know, I'll call it a limited data set, right? There's a finite amount of language, and I know it's still a massive data set. But, if you want to train, and let's just take recent computer vision models, right, from the past few years, if you wanted to train a computer vision model, what this water bottle looks like, you have to get hundreds, maybe thousands of images of it from all different angles, up and down. Your lighting conditions matter, your backgrounds matter. So then you have to take that massive amount of data for one water bottle and you have to jam it into a computer, and you've got to use, typically a bunch of GPUs, right? So we're talking a lot of compute power to then train that computer. This is a water bottle. And so it's been a capability component, has been a lot of it, right? And, credit to the crypto industry. I think they've helped explode the market for GPUs and CPUs and APUs. And so as those things have advanced, the efficiency has really started to grow, bringing that kind of barrier to entry down for computer vision. So it's just a lot of data. It's a lot of data to train something on an object.
Well, machine learning likes lots of data. I guess I go back to your large language models. It felt like we had autocomplete, on Google search, which was really just predicting the next word in a sentence.
Yeah,
It got pretty good. And then all of a sudden the LLMs came out and it's like autocomplete on steroids. We'll not just complete the sentence, we will write you a paper on it.
yeah,
Is computer vision just at the place where it hasn't had that explosion moment?
it is. Yeah, it is. So I'll give you some examples of, the efficiencies kind of like you equated to LLMs. The newer versions of the platforms coming out, they don't need hundreds or thousands of images to process an image. They're actually getting intelligent enough to where they can take maybe 20 pictures of an image and then fill in the rest of the data themselves,
Yeah.
which is way more efficient, right? So they're using that synthetic data. Some use CGI, but I don't need to know all sides of this. I just need to know what the majority. I need to know 6 pictures of it, like a cube, and then I can fill in the rest of that data. So it's starting to advance towards that advanced autocomplete on steroids, and then there's a lot of work on the back end that's been manual up until the last few years, right? So you get the pictures of the water bottle. You still had to have people go in and tell the computer that's a water bottle. And then you'd have to annotate all of those pictures. So now we're getting to where the AI is able to do auto annotation. It's able to learn on its own. So we're just starting to hit those advancements.
So I was a Jimmy John's franchisee forever. So like I always think of everything in the Jimmy John's sandwich lens.
Yeah.
I've always wondered, like, if I were to take video, I assume today we can have an LLM describe what's going on in a video.
Yeah.
How long would it take for it to describe, a day of what's going on in a Jimmy John's before, like, after a week or a month, it knows the operation.
Yeah.
It knows that they're baking bread. It knows what's going on. It may not know exactly what the bread looks like, but it conceptually understands what's happening in a frame. Is that part of the technology at all today?
It's getting there. So if you look at where, I see LLMs and computer vision, they're already starting to converge, right? So we've
Okay.
got this the intelligent brain without sight over here. And now we're giving it the eyes, but the eyes also have their own intelligence associated with them. So now you're creating that ability, not just for LLMs to understand what's going on in a store, but now they're able to actually see it through the cameras, and the cameras are able to not just give it raw data, but say, here's what we see. We see bread. We see somebody moving from point A to point B 72 times a day. Then the LLM can go back and say, well, here's a way you could do it for 30 times a day. So that's where I'm starting to see that convergence of the AI.
Yeah, that makes sense. I also, when you go through, I imagine you have to batch process a day's worth of data and try and extract things. It's not like a searchable document that I could go back. Do you have to, when you're using computer vision, when you're building these systems and working with clients, do you have to spec out exactly what you want to see and what you want to get from it up front? Or is it more of a, you can go back and search through and, extract data retrospectively?
Right now, I would say we're we're at the very beginning of that as well as we continue that convergence of LLMs and computer vision. Right now, you have to go back in and search. I know that there are companies out there that are giving the ability to, the LLM to tie into the computer vision to understand what it's looking at. You go in and search for, what was the activity like at 9:15 on a Saturday morning, and it'll either write it out for you. It can take you back to the video, all of those things. So, it's precluding us from having to sit and stare at a screen all day and fast forward and rewind through, footage of operations.
Well, there's something visceral about video. I remember I used to have my security cameras. I'd go to the bathroom, I'm at dinner, I'd always pull them up. What's going on? You have visibility into real time, what is happening in your location. Everyone loves video, but then it feels like the business case of how do I actually bring this into my operation and use it on a daily basis is one that hasn't necessarily been prosecuted very well,
Yeah.
dare I say. What's going on? How are companies today using computer vision?
There's a lot of ways, and it's interesting. I'll make one other comment. What we're trying to avoid, what I hope to avoid in the world of computer vision is kind of what happened at the beginning of the LLM explosion, right? Which is everyone's using it, but it wasn't really adding to productivity, right? Like it was a toy. And businesses were using it, they were implementing it. I've talked to a few universities and their business school programs where the executives are like, yeah, we use it, but we don't know why. And the output's not that great. And we're actually spending just as much time parsing the data and making sure it's accurate. Um, but when you look at some of the applications that have made a lot more sense, I mean, take the retail side. There's everything from automated checkout systems, right? So computer vision based checkouts. We've actually had a few companies that have been out in the market for a couple of years doing that. So think about just replacing the barcode scanner, right? Instead, or 10 people at 10 registers. Instead,
If we could get the grocery stores and not have the weight sensor where that it's constantly going off and I'm putting the wrong thing in the wrong place and
yeah,
the teller has to come over and override code. Yeah, that would be amazing.
that's it. That's it, right? Your conveyor belt's got some cameras on it, and the items are rolling through, and it's just ringing them up as quick as you can go. um, you know, you're reducing that fatigue on the employee, you're increasing the accuracy. And as these models get better and better, yeah, there's nuances, right? What is the difference between an organic avocado versus a regular one? I personally can't tell, but there are a lot of people out there who say we can do that with computer vision. So I'm looking forward to someone demonstrating that. But so the self checkouts, right? That's a big one. Certainly things like store security, and liability reduction, right? There's something on the floor in one of the aisles that's not supposed to be there. Somebody gets flagged. There's of course inventory management, shelf arrangement, all of those different items, and that's on the front end. Then we get into the back end where we're looking at inventory management. Are we how are the warehouses looking? Is everything stocked and where it should be? A little trickier because the core of computer vision is doing what human eyes can do. So how do you get inside the boxes and look in there? A lot of fun challenges that everyone's trying to resolve right now. Um, and then you get into the other verticals, right? And this is, and I'll bring up manufacturing for a second, just because it's actually been more relevant to retail than I thought initially. a lot of the retail people that we work with, they're also manufacturing some of their own foods and beverages on the back end, right? And shipping them to stores. So we may start with a company, kind of dipping their toe in the water with the low hanging fruit of self checkout. It's easy, it's low risk, you've got fallbacks. But then they say, well, wait a minute, we're producing 100,000 food items a day to ship out to our restaurants, our franchisees, our grocery stores. And the people that stand there, same thing. Who wants to stare and look and count and quality control 100,000 objects in an 8-hour shift? I mean, that's challenging, right? So we're now seeing this move upstream to the manufacturing side, even with our retail clients.
Okay, so let's go with something that we all understand. The grocery store aisle, the conveyor belt. Makes total sense. We live in a world with self-driving cars that are using cameras to navigate us around in a dynamic environment. I would think it would be pretty easy to figure out what a head of lettuce is. Walk me through, like, just conceptually, how would that system work? And where does it run into the problems?
Yeah, so the 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 challenges. So self-driving cars, they rely on a lot of different technologies, right? Computer vision's one component of a much larger system. They use lidar, they use all sorts of different things,
Well,
and so
isn't Tesla trying to do it all with cameras?
they're all computer vision. Yeah. So I would say that those systems they're definitely object identification, but primarily they're like object avoidance, right?
Yeah, yeah.
They're just like there's something there. Don't
Yeah, yeah, I got you. There's a big object moving at you. This is a problem.
hit it. The challenge is, when you get into a grocery store, into the retail world, you've got stores or you've got chains that have 150,000 unique items, right? SKU lines. Not only that, but the beverage manufacturer may have a Santa Claus on their can for 2 months out of the year. Well, that's different than just the regular can, right?
Yeah,
So how do you account for that? I was talking to one retailer the other day. They said their vendors don't even have to notify them of package changes as long as basic information is the same. And so they're not even aware that there's a new shipment coming in with different packaging on it, right? So when you get into that, now you've got to start figuring out, what are the fallbacks to how do we manage this massive set of SKUs? And then the fact that, you know, 30 to 40% of them could be changing package at any time with no notice. And then the fact that you've got just a general overall product churn of what, 20 to 30% per quarter, right? Items that come off the
yeah.
shelf and go back onto the shelf. So it's the management of all of that data is, what they're trying to overcome right now.
I would think, like, really simply, so you change packaging. Let's look at, like, Wegmans. It's my kind of grocery store that's right around the block. It's got hundreds of locations, right? They're selling a ton of different coffee.
Yeah.
You change the packaging. First time it goes through with new packaging, computer vision's like, we don't know what this is. Scan the barcode. Now it's identified it. You probably have to do that for like 5 people, 10 people, 20. I don't know what the number is, but then, you're good for the next 3 months for the hundreds of thousands of transactions. I would
Yeah.
think that that would, like, be relatively straightforward, but is it just not?
It's due to the scale as part of it, but then, there's other backups you can build into computer vision that shorten that process even more, right? So computer vision's not just identifying that box of cereal from Wegmans. It's got OCR, so it can read, the box itself. And so you could do some validation there without having to use a human to come and look at it and say, oh, it's still the same box of cereal. It's just got, reindeer on it for December instead of whatever. And then there are barcodes, computer vision can read barcodes. And so you can then start to kind of tie in and associate, what these items are and at least shorten that validation procedure, right? Is this box of cereal with the reindeer on it the same as the one without the reindeer? And at the end of the day, the answer is usually yes, right?
You've been doing this for like a decade, right?
A long time. Yeah.
Like, a decade ago, it's hard to, like, go back. My car didn't have a touch screen in it a decade ago.
Yeah.
How did you get into the world of computer vision?
You know, I it just seeing the advancements, I mean, it's always been of interest to me, right? I mean, I think it started with, the show How It's Made and just watching, again, I'll go back to the agriculture example because that's where it was primarily used. Just computers just looking at thousands of pieces of fruit or nuts coming across and flicking it out. And I'm like, well, how in the world does that work? Um, and then,
By the
it's
way, if they can figure that out, why can't we figure out the grocery store line?
no, I know we're getting there. We're getting there. But and then I kind of set computer vision aside for a while and got directly involved in the world of retail commerce and point of sale aspects of it. And then in the past few years, just seeing those advancements of computer vision and the fact that you don't need a $50,000 machine to sell everybody, right? It's now so efficient. I saw it. Well, I'll tell you what happened. Really, a company approached me and they said, "We've got this system that we can tie into your existing kiosk and turn it into computer vision in 2 weeks." And I called them on it. I was like, "There's no way. Like,
Yeah.
I know what's out there on the market. Everything's really expensive. I don't have the budget to go hire data scientists and additional ML engineers. I don't want to do any of that." And this company said, "Well, you don't need any of that. Like, we've taken all that out and we've made it user friendly so that your local general manager at a grocery store could do it and implement it." So I called him on it. Took one of our kiosks home to my home office. Was playing with it and bought a webcam at Best Buy and got one of my developers to help me out for a few hours, and we actually did it. And we're able to collect objects, train the objects, build the models, and stick it on the kiosk. And it was actually days. It wasn't even weeks. So that was the kind of the turning point for me where I said, okay, we're now starting to see that level of efficiency to where, people can actually do this without having to go make giant capital expenditures, really long, wait times for model building, all of that stuff. So I jumped in with both feet probably about 2 years ago. I said, all right, I'm back into the world of computer vision. We're just gonna go all in and see what happens. So, and then long story short, then I became chief revenue officer of that same company because I was like, I like where you can go in. You really got something here. So
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I also just imagine there's this, I mean, you guys are in the hardware business in some ways. You're relying on cameras. I just go back to what was my smartphone camera in the
yeah.
early 2000s. It was, 1 megapixel or whatever it is. Now all of a sudden, I got my daughter's Christmas play last night and I'm recording it on my phone in 4K with, 60 frames a second.
Yeah.
Like it's a different world. Has that helped? Is that
Oh,
like a tide your rise, going with?
yeah, tremendously. I mean, let's just go back to that cost model, right? I mean, what you're seeing now is a lot of computer vision companies, that build the software side, they can be hardware agnostic. But to your point, you can buy a 4K camera off Amazon now for under $100.
Yeah.
And, as long as it meets these minimum requirements, you can have a really powerful computer vision system. You do need quality, right? Both to capture the objects and train the objects. And certainly a better camera helps identify objects. And so the fact that 4K cameras aren't something you have to go to a specialty camera store anymore for and, spend $4,000 on, has really, again, accelerated that build. And then you can go to the market and say, look, we don't need to sell you cameras. Here are the specs. Maybe we've got a partner in our partner ecosystem, but just call them, use them. They know exactly what you need. They shouldn't be more than $100 and away you go. So it's made a massive difference.
Well, I think one of the problems you run into, especially in restaurants, is the hardware component. I don't want to put a bunch of cameras in that I'm not going to use, or I want to use my existing cameras. I remember I think they were ADT, like stock cameras that we got back in, 2010. They
Yeah.
were awful. The resolution was awful on the cameras.
Yeah.
If I'm a restaurant and I'm thinking, okay, I got to re-outfit cameras in my stores at some point. I want to use computer vision in the future, but maybe not today. Is there a minimum resolution? Or do you have to have a special camera to do computer vision? Like, how should you think about purchasing hardware today so that you're in a place where you could utilize the technology in the future?
Yeah. To get good results right now, 4K is all you need. I mean, you just need 4K cameras. Um, the frames per second doesn't really matter. You can use commercial grade cameras. You can use webcams you buy at Best Buy. As long as that data coming in meets that minimum, we'll call it, you can do it with 2K, you can do it with lower, but the accuracy, it just like with anything else, right? It's like you don't have your readers on as a human, right? You want to make sure you got your glasses on, you're able to see everything clearly. Very much to your point. I'm still shocked when I see, a crime report on the news and they got the security camera footage and it's like
Always.
I didn't
Yeah.
know cameras still existed, right? Like how are people still, using these old antiquated
That
cameras?
blurry, like half turned look where they're walking and they can't get a clean shot every time.
Yeah. Yeah, always. So, yeah, now it's as easy as a 4K camera. And what makes it even easier for clients is that, or for users at the end market, is it's also getting efficient to where, it used to be computer vision had to have the big on-site servers, and you had to process all your data on site. But as these efficiencies grow, you're now able to do two things. One, you can go to edge-based devices, right? So just small devices that are in the store. Maybe they're in the camera. There's edge-based cameras already out there. Or you can leverage the cloud, right? So you're able to now start pushing that data to the cloud, capturing the identification. The time, the latency is dropping rapidly as well. So you're not having to do this massive capital outlay for servers or things like that. So a lot
Hey,
more.
on the edge computing thing, specifically for computer vision, I had a conversation with Maria from Polona AI. She was VP of engineering for, she was CTO at Tinder, VP of engineering for Meta, Google, like all of their big tech companies. And I asked her about edge computing and cameras, and she's like, that's so like last decade, right? Everything's cloud now. Like there's no
Yeah.
reason to be processing on the edge unless you're in some remote place that can't connect. You where does edge computing? Because I've heard it both ways. I've heard people on the computer vision side say it's all about edge computing and getting it on the camera.
Yeah.
Walk me through edge computing and computer vision.
Well, I still look at it as there's still use cases that make sense for both, right? So, with cloud-based computer vision, you still have to communicate to the cloud. You still have to come back. You still, a lot of people want offline capability, right? So if you and you're going to lose internet at some point, right? As much as we love our internet providers, I didn't mean to laugh when I said that, but as much as we love our internet providers, you still lose service every now and then. And just because you lose internet doesn't mean you should have to shut the store down, stop making transactions, right? So with edge-based devices, you're able to continue that processing, and then you just simply, upload everything and kind of do a reconciliation when you get connectivity back. The other one is it is that speed component, right? So if I go back to the manufacturing side of it, and that was a real example, right? 100,000, maybe 200,000 items going through in an 8-hour shift. That's a lot to be hitting the cloud with,
Yeah.
right? And so it's not just speed, but there's a cost component to it, right? Every time you send data back to one of these cloud companies, you're paying some pennies. When you do it with an edge-based model, it's loaded locally onto a device, you're not paying those cloud fees. And so, um, for lower volume venues, right? Maybe a restaurant doesn't care if they're having, if they've got 500 transactions a day and it costs them $5. But if you've got a facility or a venue or a stadium and they're doing, you know, 100,000 transactions a day, that starts to add up really, really quickly. And so they're going to want that edge base because you're not hitting the cloud, you're not paying the cloud fees, you're more likely just paying a flat monthly subscription fee. So it's just a matter of how are you managing your costs on that side.
Part of it I would think is, like large language models. Text is not a big file, right? We can just have text files for days and go reprocess them. But if I wanted to store, I don't know, 1,000 locations worth of 4K video, that would be a ton
It's
of data.
huge. Yeah, it's
Do
huge.
when you're doing these kind of things, do you have to back up all the data? If I'm a restaurant, right? Am I backing up all of my data for future training? Like, how does that work?
You don't have to store all the data, right? Like the goal is how can we make this as efficient as possible? So, I guess the answer is it depends, right? Like you may not train, I'm trying to think of a good example here. Um, if you've got a scene in a restaurant, you don't have to constantly watch that restaurant. You just want to train it for what it should be looking for, right?
Yes, snippets.
Or the anomalies, right? So if the store always looks like it should, like who cares? Like there's nothing to store, save, or whatever. Um, and so in a model like that, you're able just to train it on what to actually look for. You don't care about the rest of that data. So if that data looks clean, maybe you've got a short retention policy and then you wipe it and you move on. And then it just stores these snippets where you've got the anomalies, right? Um, it's it's the same in any environment. We're trying to get rid of, and because the data files are so large, right? Just how do we reduce the amount of data that's required? And it does start with being efficient just in your ask, right? You don't need to record the floor for 24/7 and for a year and then store that for 10 years.
Okay, a much heated debate that me and my co-founder have is on recording internal and external calls with, the AI note takers that are
Yeah.
recording. They're storing the whole file because we're going back to get those files at different times. But the question being, should I be letting everyone record us? It'd be great to be able to go through every product meeting we had on, some new launch over time and have an AI model say, how did we come to these conclusions? What fallacies did we fall to? What should we do differently next time? But at the same time, who owns the data? How are they using it? What's proprietary and not? I imagine from the computer vision, world, you've probably got a take on the AI note takers.
Yeah, it's well, first of all, I just approach every conversation now like I'm being recorded. I mean, every conversation, and
For the
it's
record, you are being recorded right now.
do we oh, we are? Okay, I didn't know that. Um, so I think, that's a shift that the world is kind of coming to, right? Just assume everything's being recorded. And I'm not a fan of that, but I think that's just the reality that we live in. But on the other side of that, and on the good side, there is a positive component to it. And you just outlined that, right? I mean, today and especially entrepreneurs, right? I'm an entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur, and we're juggling maybe 20 different conversations a day on 20 different topics. And how do I remember what I said and what I talked about and who did I say it to? And even if you're just recording those conversations, like the old school reporters with the tape recorder, where do you go find that? So, it becomes that trade off, right? Are we comfortable giving up some of that privacy to be able to kind of develop that second brain and be able to go in and dig back to a conversation we had 2 months ago? um yeah, there's some topics and some conversations where I'm totally good with that. It it does get stickier with computer vision. There's way more privacy concerns, right?
Yeah.
um there's let's talk about clients that want to use it in schools, even for something simple like meal tracking. You're in an environment now with underage people, kids. How are you doing that? Are you and fortunately we're starting to see some nice advancements and innovations there, right? I mean, anonymization of the data. There's always the automatic face blurring, but then how do you actually anonymize that data? And you're seeing some things come out like um, credit cards, right? Like when you process a credit card transaction on your phone, it's actually being tokenized and encrypted before it ever leaves your phone, and then it's pretty much deleted right after. So there are companies that can do that with computer vision, right? It identifies it. Oh, that's Matt. But before it ever leaves the device, it's now encrypted, tokenized, and it's not really Matt. What's
I
done with that on the other end? That's a big discussion, right?
I would think that AI actually causes some real issues with this. If I had go back to the news story, they caught that person on camera. Well, there's a security camera there. We've all lived in a world with security cameras. We know that they're around. Somehow that didn't violate our privacy,
Yeah.
right? But now all of a sudden, AI gets involved and can do more things with that video. Nothing really changed other than the processing of the data, right? And like, how did that actually even change anything?
Yeah. You know, I would be on the side of saying it hasn't changed a lot. I mean, you do think about that, right? You go back to the example of the schools. I mean, they're covered in security cameras right now.
Yeah.
There's cameras everywhere. You get on the school bus, there's cameras on the school buses. You go, let's just take it one step back. You walk out the front door of the people's houses. What's on the front door of every house, right? You got your video doorbell, I mean, so I think as a society, we're becoming more used to that now. Where I should probably personally get more involved is, what are the regulations around it? What are the data privacy rules around it? I think our legislators are still trying to figure that out and catch up. That's the scary part for me is the man,
Yeah.
right?
Why? Go into that.
Well, I just think and I don't mean this in the negative way, but there's a lot of ignorance around the technology, in our with our politicians. I think they're still trying to understand it. They're trying to figure it out. I think you've got new generations of politicians who've grown up with it and maybe have a better take on it. Um, but then there's the management of it, right? And there's the challenges of the probably billions of dollars on both sides of the argument being thrown around by lobbyists. So finding that middle ground on what's best for us as a society, I think is going to take some time. And I think until then, it's going to be a little bit of the Wild West. I mean, it's not pretty much once, twice, three times a week, you can turn on the news and see there's a debate about how do we regulate and manage this.
I don't know what it is about images and video that is so different or scary. I I I have a weird thought experiment I do every now and then where it's like, hey, if I was to commit a crime, right, what would I have to do? Well, one, I'd have to leave my phone at home, right? Because they're geo tracking me everywhere I go. I can't Google anything about it because they're going to get that information. Probably can't drive my wife's car. It's definitely so what 2022, right? It's definitely got some GPS
Yeah.
location. I'm not sure if my truck that's from 2010 is going to be able to track me. So maybe I'm riding a bike, right? Like the world knows what I purchased based on my credit card, where I am based on my phone but somehow the idea of you captured an image of me and you knew I was there,
Yeah,
it's scary.
it is. Yeah. Yeah,
I
it
have
is.
no what is that relationship with images and videos that's so, I don't know, fundamentally different in our minds?
Yeah. I think that's a good question. I mean, I think, an image, and I'll go back to my definition of computer vision, right? And let's set aside deepfakes for a second, because that's a whole
By
nother.
the way, that was on my list to get to right after this. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But an image, again, deepfakes aside, it's the actual truth, right? Like, yeah, they could track your phone, but maybe you were in the area, but I wasn't there. I didn't rob the bank. I had nothing to do with that. I just happened to be driving by on my way to get a coffee. But putting you there in the location, yeah, that's the challenge. That's the challenge, right? And it's personal too, right? It's actually you. It's you standing there. So I mean, there's a it'll be interesting, right? Because I'm wondering if we're ever going to get over. I don't want to call it the creepiness factor, because we all know that the cameras are there now. It's just you don't ever think they're actually being used to identify you, even though more and more they are.
Well, let's go to the creepiness factor, and not so much the creepiness factor, but the plausible deniability.
Yeah.
I was not aware of this. I was scared when I first heard about computer vision and being able to quantify what's going on and monitor, are we following health procedures? Did everybody wash their hands? And I thought, oh my gosh, if I was aware of everything we did wrong in our restaurant, right? Like it would be insane. I don't want to know that, right? I'd have to fire everybody.
Yeah.
Like you've got spy cameras that are getting, like letting you know all of the things that you could be sued for. Like,
Yeah.
how did people get over that? Because there are a ton of benefits, but like that seems like an actual cost, or is it not an actual cost? And, ignorance is bliss is a bad policy for running a business.
That's an interesting question, right? I mean, very much to your point, there is a danger in having too much data and too much information, right? And prior to, this convergence of the AIs, of the LLMs and computer vision, you could only watch so much footage of your store, right? Like you may go back and review something because someone said there was an incident.
Yeah.
Um, Or you may be bored one day and just watch all day and just make notes. Like, here are the 10 things I saw wrong and it's driving you crazy. But, there is a bit of danger with the ability to rapidly search for issues or challenges, or you just sitting there and instead of asking Chat GPT to, build you a project plan, you're asking for it to outline the full day of a store and what went wrong. And then to give you that report every morning, you're going to go crazy. And so, I think it becomes a question of who's managing it, how are they managing it? And it'll go back to, I made the comment about computer vision's kind of, still in that infancy stage, but so are LLMs, right? As people were still learning how to use them, what should they be used for, what not. Uh, you're going to have people who are challenged by how they should use it productively, right? Because at the end of the day, you getting a report on everything that went wrong in the store that day is not going to ultimately serve you for the greater good. It may help you resolve some issues, but to your point, you're going to want to go fire everybody and you're going to be mad every day. And so how do we find that balance to, I don't know, live as humans and not like computers?
So it's funny. We all choose illogical examples for things that our brains go to. So forecasting, everyone's question is always, what if a bus shows up? It's like, well, if a bus shows up, we're all kind of screwed because no one knows that the bus is coming, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not necessarily the thing that really matters, but it's the thing that, everyone's head goes to. I would think, on the computer vision side, something like you've been notified by your computer vision that you haven't put the wet floor sign out for the last 5 times you've mopped in a row. And you've been notified every day. And then someone slips and falls. And now you got to go on the stand and they say, hey, were you aware that you were not putting out the wet floor sign? And it's like, well, hard for me to say no because I've been notified every day by my computer vision thing. Whereas before it's like, no, I had no idea. It's part of our policies. We always do it. I don't know if they missed it that day, but I wasn't negligent. Is
Yeah.
that a rational fear? Is that what you hear from people, or is that not something that ever even comes up?
I have not heard that come up. I mean, that makes sense, right? You'd like to think that the people are using that tool to say, hey, we need to put out the wet floor sign.
Well, and it's not
I-
necessarily the wet floor. That's where my mind popped to. It could be washing your hands, right? Or it could
yeah.
be, something that you could get sued for.
Yeah. 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 You get the,
Employees not taking breaks.
yeah. Yeah. Again, I think that if it comes down to people using it properly, right? Are we trained on it? Do we know what to do with it? Just because you're getting the data doesn't mean you know how to act on it, right? I mean, there's some inherent reason that you saw that employee not wash their hands 5 times and you didn't go warn them. So what happens, right? I mean, someone from the West Coast is going to say, well, we should automate that. And then the employee gets a text or something, and that'll probably be a product. But I think in general, that's a that's a real risk. If you're not using it to improve your business, then yeah, it does become a liability.
And I
Um,
imagine that's why you go work with a computer vision company. That's what they do, because it's not necessarily the technology of being able to it's not the hardware, it's not necessarily the algorithms, but, like, how do I take this technology and actually implement it? Because there's so many different facets to operationalize it.
there are, yeah, there are, and I think there's going to be a lot of wasted dollars spent on projects that just aren't a great fit. One thing that I've not been impressed with the AI industry is just selling product to sell product, selling systems to sell systems. I can't stand that, right? And that's where you see a lot of churn. That's where you see a lot of wasted dollars. I think it was MIT put out a report showing that after, whatever it is, 3 5 years of strong AI systems to use like Chat GPT, the productivity really hasn't increased. I mean, it's kind of flatlined. And
I I
so
I'm begging to differ on that one, by the way. Like, I gotta tell you, we were talking about this before, but we've wanted to do restaurant wrapped. Get all of your data for the year for your restaurant, give you the walkthrough similar to Spotify. You see it on LinkedIn. You see everyone's got a wrapped now. There's not one for the restaurant industry. Tried to do it 2 years ago, not even close.
yeah,
We were trying to find an outside software that we could do it with. tried to do it the year before with, AI coding, did not do a very good job. This year, I just spun up a demo on like Google AI Studio, which by the way was like incredibly good,
Really?
at least doing like the first MVP. And then I moved it over to Cursor and it like did everything. That was a project that we would not have been able to do a
Yeah.
while back. Now, you can make the argument it's not really making the world better and, adding a tremendous business value there, but
Yeah.
it is getting there to the point where, it's actually building stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I would say we're not on a different page there. I think that you spent time with it, you educated yourself on it, you knew what you wanted as a deliverable, and you were able to leverage AI to do that, right? I think the challenge is there was a time when people were just using LLMs to use LLMs. And
Yeah.
they're starting to figure that out, and they're starting to see these applications. You know, you're only just now starting to see AI taught in the classrooms, right? What's been the biggest challenge in our schools in the last 5 years? No AI. You can't use,
Social media.
you can't do all social media, phones, all of that. But then there's this. Everyone's freaked out about using AI to cheat and stuff like that, and we're not educating our society on how to actually properly use it. And now you're actually starting to see AI classes that allow students to collaborate, and build things, and teaching them how to expand on their thoughts with AI instead of replacing their thoughts. And so when you see that move into the market, as these people go out and get jobs, I think then you're going to see a lot of that, good implementation of AI. And computer vision is no different, right? We've had people approach us and they want it for this project, and we're like, "What are you going to do with it?" And they're like, "Well," and then you get this awkward silence, and it's we want it to do this, 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 and like, well, we're not there yet as a technology. That's great, but they want to implement it anyway. So I think you're going to see a lot of more intelligent decision making around the use of AI in the near term.
So my parents love to send me the articles on cell phone usage and social media amongst children and how it's a huge problem. And I always sit there and think like that'll be solved. My girls are like 7 and 9. That problem's getting solved because everyone's aware about it.
Yeah,
AI is the next problem that we should all be concerned about. And I have this moral dilemma that I'm wrestling with. Do you lean into the AI? Have them be an AI native generation? Do you try and keep them off of and away for the AI? I mean, like, it's a fascinating debate.
yeah.
Have you thought about that at all?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've got a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old, both in high school. And I've got a 10-year-old, but the two older kids, I've tried to work with them and educate them on how do you properly use it, right? Don't use it to write your papers, but use it to do the research, right? Like kind of help you piece together your own thoughts. And I think you have to do that because it's kind of like things you don't want them looking at on the internet. They're going to stumble across it one day, and it's just hoping that they're educated and they know what they're looking at and they know what to do with it when they see it.
Well, I go two ways, right? We, our generation, the generation before, generated a whole lot of text. And basically they used that text, our history, to train the AI.
Yeah,
Now the next generation is almost being trained by the AI and given instructions what to do. And
yeah,
so they're not having to think as creatively and freely and do that critical problem solving. But then on the flip side of the argument, my daughter came in, the 9-year-old. She's like, we're working on coding in class, and it was some kind of gamey type thing. And I'm like, all right, I was playing this. Google's little AI studio was something I was playing with last week. And
yep,
so I pulled it out and I said, do you want to see how to actually like build something? And I turned her loose and she got to just build games for herself and she was good at it. But when you sit down to program for the first time, you realize you can have all these ideas, but when you stare at a blank page and you have to actually create, that's a really hard muscle to build.
it is. Yeah,
And now my 9-year-old is building games. So it's like, all right, are they going to lose the critical, problem solving skills, or are they building this other skill set of how to use this tool and have to think like outside the box where you can create anything?
yeah. Yeah, I think my take on it is that you have to assume that AI is not going away, and you have to expose them to it and teach them how to use it, and teach them how to flex that new muscle, right? That new, like, use it to expand your creativity. Don't ask it for game ideas. Give it your game idea and
Yeah.
expand on that, right? Like that kind of thinking.
Well, it's also interesting watching. I've watched my co-founder, who's the actual technology guy, his foray into AI, because he has all these preconceived notions of how you develop software and the right way to develop software and how it should be structured. And I don't on a lot of this. So I'll do things that are very different than what he'd do and just lean on the AI heavily. Like, oh, I don't care what you're doing in the back end because it'll just rewrite all of that when I figure out where I ultimately want to be. The new generation that's coming up, they're they're not going to have any of those preconceived notions. Like they may leapfrog everybody because of the baggage we have from the past.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. And just to go back to your other point, what'll be interesting to see is all of the text that we generated that trained the AI to begin with. Now it's generating its own text.
Yeah,
Then what is it going to be trained off of? And so is it becoming intelligent enough to start understanding more of the trend in human thought, not just what we wrote down in the past, right?
that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
I think that's what we have to hope for and hopefully push for. It's that it's not, because you're right. All the text it's going to read in the future is going to be stuff that it generated, right? So is it creating this dangerous echo chamber, loop, or is it actually saying, okay, this is what people are trying to build and grow. This is where we're going to take this.
Well, it's like signal to noise, right? You had a lot of signal because people manually wrote these things in the past. You knew it was all real information. And now
Yeah.
you've got a bunch of noise with AI generating all this synthetic data.
Yeah.
And that brings us back to deepfakes. Where are we at with deepfakes today? Like I see every time I get on whatever TikTok, right? There's always like some tsunami that's
Uh,
fake. That's
it's-
like it's
yeah.
just, but it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Like, what is the state of deepfakes today?
Man, it's an ongoing battle right now. I mean, it's kind of like just going back to simple LLMs and the technology that can tell a teacher if a paper was written by, a bot or if it was written by a human. And I think that, the challenge is twofold, right? One is the poor journalists and the poor
Oh,
newscasters who they're getting all this data in every day, and their job is to actually put stuff on millions of screens around the world, right? So their job of validating this stuff, is going to be crazy, right? And China just nuked India, and okay, wait, is this real or is this not? And so
well, how about a world where we don't have the journalist in between? We just have social media and everyone's sharing it, and
that
you're your own curator.
that's even scarier, right? Now is the news being dictated by a bunch of creators, and it's not real. So, you're definitely seeing, I think the social media companies are trying to combat that, right? You'll start seeing now at the bottom, this was detected as generated by AI. And so, I don't know how that battle is going to end up. Are they going to be able to figure out how to fool even the systems themselves? But that's a big challenge. And to me, I mean, yeah, is it fascinating to watch the fake tsunami do whatever? But like, what did I just watch, and why did I just watch it, and what was the point? I mean,
Is it that easy to do? Like, I haven't played around. I guess I've played around with like Sora and some of these, image generation, video generation. None of it really comes out very good for me. Is
yeah.
is it widely available that you can just go do really good deep fakes today?
I think it's getting there. Yeah, and it's, like you, I've played with it. I've played with Sora. We played with it in the office. It always, I don't know why, but everyone looks creepy in it. Like just
Yeah,
the
yeah.
smiles, and they're too happy, and it's it's not real. But then you get these creators that actually spend time molding it and flexing it and making it actually look real. I mean, I think that's going to be the challenge, right? It's like a good hacker. A hacker, starts out with sloppy code, and then, then they get to where they're, taking over, Tesla's driving car systems or stuff like that. So I think you're always going to have two sides of that coin, people creating it and people fighting it.
So I posted this on LinkedIn a while back. I was traveling through like Miami or going out of Fort Lauderdale, and I got on the free airport Wi-Fi, and I'm like, you know what? Before I just click the terms and conditions, I'm going to go run them through AI and have it summarize. What am I actually signing on? And by the way, the results were insane, right? It was like the county, not the state, not the US government, the county owns whatever you post on social media. And they own your image. Like, so there's a photo of me, right? There a video that I'm posting. They own the right to do anything they want with that. And
Wow.
it was like, it went on and on. I don't know who wrote it. Again, it was the county. So like every county in America could write whatever the heck. No one reads it. I assume through maybe recording on Riverside. My guess is terms and conditions say they, can use my video for something. I'm sure that Google Meets or Zoom, somebody owns me and what I look like.
Yeah.
And could probably deepfake me legally. Am I just like going conspiracy theory, or is that actually probably the way the world works?
Unfortunately, I think you're probably right. I mean, when it comes down to it, right, and what we've learned over the last decade, it's who owns the data, right? As cool as the technology is, it really comes down to what is the data and who owns it. And so, I don't know what tools are going to come out. I think there's probably a whole sub industry of helping you protect your own identity, your data, retain ownership of that, right? It's like we're all pro sports athletes going to be out there just fighting to keep our own images, and we're just a person. That's
Yeah.
that's going to be really, really challenging.
But as a computer vision company, is that something that's on your mind? Is
It
that
is.
affect
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, what's interesting is, our take on it has been, we try to take, I'll call it that ethical, that moral high road, right? Customers own their data. We don't want to keep their data. We don't want to own their data. And do we realize we're probably leaving tons of money on the table? Yeah, absolutely. I think you know, you hope, you hope that there's people out there in the industry who feel the same way, right? Would you want your face and likeness owned by someone else to do with as they please or as they want? And, for us, that's a really big thing. The privacy, yes, you're making a trade, right? When you click that link in the Miami airport, you're giving up something to get internet for free. What is the extent of that? Should they have the rights to everything you post and your pictures and all of that? I think that's for you to decide.
Broward County.
Yeah, calling you out, Broward County. but I think we're going to learn over time what is that trade off, and the challenge now is just it's not transparent, right? There's no transparency because to your point, you were probably, I wouldn't be surprised if you're the first person that actually checked out the terms and conditions, right?
Took a while to
And
process. Probably was the first time it'd been uploaded.
yeah, and you're not going to see that until you start having more and more issues with that, right? So the first time someone does use it to post on LinkedIn and then they see it reused somehow by the airport system, that's when you're going to start causing the problems. And so until then, everyone just kind of acquiesces. So I think you've got to have, unfortunately, issues and friction arise before we start to make meaningful change in that space. Until then, everyone is happy with the trade-off, but they don't really know what they're trading off.
Do you remember when Google came out with Street View and you could go, walk around? So one of the things that arose as a result of that was ADA compliance. And there was this gigantic wave of lawsuits because lawyers were basically combing through the streets to find anything out of compliance.
Yeah.
Is there a version of that as computer vision gets better that is the wave of impending lawsuits or, concerns?
Probably so. I think that most of the people we talk to about it are actually wanting to leverage it to avoid those liabilities and concerns, right? So go back to the retail stores, right? How can we let's say no one walked around that corner of the store for an hour and there's been water on the floor from a dripping, condensation from a vent. Um, so I think you're going to have a lot of people leveraging it on both sides. Again, unfortunately, right? You're going to have lawyers on one side using computer vision to say, well, this isn't how it happened, or, Street View allowed us to find this. Then the other side, you're going to have cities using it to actually drive around in a neuro like car looking for things that shouldn't be there and sending workers out to fix it as quickly as they can.
Well, I guess the big difference is, Google made that available to the world, almost open source to be used. Obviously, if you're a business and you're bringing it internal, you can use it preventatively. But
Yeah.
is there a version of that open source video that is even out there today?
The challenge there is going to be, it's either going to have to be some sort of governmental organization, massive nonprofit, or another Google, right? Another
Yeah.
version of Google that wants to, it takes that size and scale to do it. So it'd be interesting to see who builds it.
Yeah. Well, and then I'm sorry, I was kind of shifting gears. Do you the other one that kind of comes to mind is, for a lot of these, you're either the product, right? You're either buying the product or you are the product,
Yeah.
right? Have you run into competitors yet that are just giving away your cameras? We're going to do this at a really discount rate because that trove of data is really valuable and they are going to monetize it, unlike yourself.
Yeah. You know, Not yet, not to any scale. I think it goes back to just the sheer cost that it's had on the back end. So that's a really expensive initiative. But I think as it grows, you're definitely going to see more of that subsidizing the cost of the equipment, of the model bills, and all of that because they've got this data pipeline on the back end. So it's definitely coming. And a bit of a tangent, but kind of back to your other point. You know what's increasingly, I think, me as someone who's trying to establish a good name for computer vision out in the market, it's you pay for these products, but then you still have to give away stuff, right? There's still terms and conditions that are onerous, and they're still going to use your image and all of that, right? You're paying for it, but it's still their data. I still don't understand some of these models that people are coming out with, and I think you're going to see a big pushback there in the next few years.
What's your take on the Alexas and Meta's glass or whatever that sits in the kitchen and follows you around with the video? I am afraid of them, and I'm sure it's irrationally so. But something about that having a camera that's always on and a mic that's always on in my house concerns the hell out of me.
You know,
Do you have one?
I had one answer, and I'm going to contradict myself. No, I won't. I don't, and I won't have one in my house. Yet I have 5 iPhones. I mean, in my house, right? So, like, really, what's the difference when you look at it? So, you
Apple's
know,
got a good marketing department on
yeah,
safety and security and privacy.
yeah, it's perception, right? Because I mean, those electronics, they're not cheap, but we don't pay very much for them. And I'm sure if you did the same thing with Alexa's terms and conditions, you're going to see similar to what you saw at the airport, right?
Well,
Something
first
that's
off, if you're going to give me a mini supercomputer that has a voice AI agent that I can interact with, and also the camera to be able to film me, and you're going to sell it to me for like $99, I assume they're making the money off somewhere else.
that's it. Yeah, that's it. I mean, and you could go to, the Amazons of the world and they'll say, oh, we're making money off of purchases that people make through it. But there's a whole nother pool of data there that no one lets sit idle. So yeah, I'm not a fan of the in-house always listening devices. I think the phone is just a necessity that you have to live with and, figure out how to manage it. I don't have a good answer for that. I thought I did, and then I thought, well, I've got a phone in my pocket all the time. It already knows everything about me.
In some ways, I've moved over to the Apple ecosystem. Like I've got a Mac now. I switched off a PC. It's like, if I'm going to give all my data away, it should just be to one organization, like not multiple.
That's fair. Yeah. And that's almost impossible to do too, no, though, right? I mean,
Totally.
it's every website you log into, I mean, it's crazy. Even on that note, I remember I was running a whole different company probably about 10 years ago when GDPR came out. And I thought, man, this is really strict and challenging and regulated. And now I look back and I go, man, they really understood it before, like even we understood it, right? In the US.
For all of us that have no idea what GRDPR, what is that?
It's essentially the privacy laws in Europe. So
Ah,
much more strict. So a good example, I had just started using HubSpot when it was first coming out, and it was so amazing. I could see when someone opened an email, I could see when they clicked on everything, and you didn't have to have any opt-in at all. And then GDPR came out and it just all went away. And I said, "Oh, well, that makes it more challenging, right?" And now I look back and I say, "That's actually I don't want people tracking when I open my emails on my side or looking at websites or things like that." So, um, yeah, I think that the privacy laws they've got a long way to go too, especially here in the States.
well, I can't think of a better person that has seen the evolution of video, computer vision, where it's been, where it's going. Paint me the picture for the next year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. Like, where's this all eventually going?
Well, I mean, definitely going back to that convergence of things like the LLMs and computer vision, right? You now have this massive brain that we've built. I'm not going to go to the Terminator example fully, but I will say this. When LLMs first kind of started getting a lot better, everyone said, "Oh, AI, the end is nigh. AI is here, and it's going to gain sentience, and artificial general intelligence is coming." And I didn't see it that way because it couldn't see anything yet. It couldn't understand the physical world around it. Right? It knew it was being told what it was, but it couldn't actually interact or engage. And so I think as you're going to see a couple of things really start to happen. You're going to see that intelligence level really ramp up because it's now able to take into context what's happening in a live restaurant with movement and things happening around or on the street. And then the next stage is going to be how is that kind of new system integrated into robotics and automation. So now you're not just interacting with the world from a digital sense on a screen, but now you've actually got the physical ability to
Yeah,
interact with the
it's
world.
first step is conceptualizing the world with all of your senses,
Yeah,
right? And then there is the actual physical entering that world and
that's right.
affecting it.
That's it. That's exactly it. You'll see small cases of that around where there's a company that does laser weeding and they use camera
I'm
vision to
sorry, laser weeding?
laser weeding. Yeah. So what they're doing is for crops, instead of spraying pesticides, they've got cameras on the crops that can identify a weed versus a soybean, and they got lasers, and the lasers zap the weed. Now, do we
I
want
would
computers with lasers yet? I don't know, but they're doing.
I would buy that here's the scary one, going to the Terminator. I would buy that product, the little drone that goes out and around my yard and zaps the weeds I've identified.
Yeah,
Like, I and that is not that far off of Terminator.
it's very very close. It's very very close. I mean, it's being done and it's mounted to a big tractor, but I mean, I would buy a laser weeder for my yard. I would buy one that just flies around during a party and zaps mosquitoes. You know,
Aaron, we need a that maybe that's our little joint venture. We're gonna start the laser weeding drone.
I'm in. I'm in.
I had, I brought up Maria before, but, your Terminator thing, literally, that's what they were building. Like, I'm sitting here on this conversation, and they're working with hospitality, they're doing, the voice side of things, and they're moving into the computer vision side of things, and, I got to, like, "What are you actually doing?" And she was VP at all these fancy tech companies. She's like, "We're working on multi-model modality orchestration." Basically, how do you tie computer vision to voice, to data, to, actually have all of the senses? And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh my gosh, you're building the brain for Terminator." Like, seriously.
And I'm still a bit of a maybe a pragmatist when it comes to that. I think you can put all these tools together, but just because you put all the pieces of the car together doesn't mean it's going to be able to drive itself yet, right? That's a bad analogy because cars can drive themselves. But you understand what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
it's, you know, I think there are futurists out there who think that you can digitally recreate a soul. I'll just say it, right? A human's innate, you know, built-in ability to think and reason and be creative and not just be creative, but be chaotic and be unreasonable and all of these different things, right? I don't personally believe that's anytime close, if possible at all. Are we going to be able to create something that resembles AGI? Absolutely, right? Predictive analytics, the ability to understand what's happening, what needs to happen next. A lot of that's already being done today. But to create, like recreate the true human mind, um, you know, I'm a little bit that's a little bit far fetched for me. I think we're gonna get close. I think we're gonna get fooled by it. But it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see if it could actually happen.
One of my last questions for you is, how far ahead is the technology really than what we see, right? I had a creepy call with somebody like a year ago, and like a fancy person that was one of the big tech companies and was like slightly adjacent to them, but was basically running um, cloned sales reps with like thousands of them that were
Yeah.
actively selling things, and it was more of an experiment, and people weren't even able to identify it. Like, I was having the questions for him, like, how do I identify, like, what are the things to look for? And it was like, reflection in the glasses, and always look at the eyes because it's a giveaway for these things. It made me think that it was real. And so I guess what I'm asking is, how much do you think the technology is actually way further ahead than we think, and we're just not seeing it because it hasn't been productized?
Yeah. I think that that's a good question because there is so much marketing going on out there, right? Like it's funny to me that, and it's ironic. I'm going to kind of swing the other way and then I'll come back. But it's ironic that when LLMs first kind of caught fire, the marketers were the most worried about losing their job. That was one of the first things, right? I don't need a marketing person anymore. But the reality is there's so much marketing work going into who has the best AI platform and who has built the most advanced product. And I'll tell you, Matt, like when I meet with a lot of these companies and you get under the hood, they're still trying to figure it out, right? A lot of it, unfortunately, is marketing. Now, there is a lot of really advanced technology out there that we haven't seen yet, right? But it's still extremely inefficient. It's still, I think, a few years from even being productized or commercialized. Um, so I think we still have a ways to go to make that happen. But think about the combination of. Uh, so let's talk about the combination of the LLMs, the computer vision, and the robots, right? Like more often than not, whenever you see a video online, it's of a robot like falling over and like struggling to even get up. And so,
I don't know, every now and then you see, like, the Boston Dynamics or Boston
well,
Robotics, and they've got some
yeah.
dog that's, like, doing some crazy things.
And those are the companies that have the real tech and the things we don't know about. Like I'm scared to think about what they actually do have behind the curtain. I think that the groups that are doing that are very, very few, right? And it's because it is still such a nascent and expensive technology that it's only going to be your DARPAs and your government backed entities, right? And that's scary in itself because their number one priority is defense, not the betterment of
And
peace.
that's
Most
where my mind goes to. I think of all the movies in the '90s and, like, the facial recognition, they're searching the database, and then you fast forward, what, 30 years, and we're still watching the news with the blurred guy, like, suspect, held up at gunpoint, and it's like, I feel like there's probably some really good stuff that's happened in the last 30 years that we just don't know about.
what I'm hoping it's like, and what I think you're going to see is that companies like Boston Dynamics and some other large companies, somebody, especially in the realm of AI, needs to kind of become the new NASA, right? Like this organization that built our ability to go to space and land on the moon, and they gave us Velcro, and they gave us, all sorts of these new technology. Velcro is such a stupid example, but you get what I'm saying.
Actually, it was a good one. I liked the Velcro.
but what are these companies that are actually spinning out these new technologies that you can actually commercialize? Um, there's very few of those right now, right? And NASA has spun off all of these tremendous companies from it, right? I mean, not just in space, but these industries everywhere. And so, I think that's what tried to happen with LLMs. The problem was people were just kind of rewrapping one core product over and over and over. And, instead of moving its hand this way, it can move its hand. It was been oversimplified. I think you're going to see a big uptick in actual technologies and licensing and things like that start to come out in the coming
I
years.
think you described what OpenAI was actually supposed to be when they started, a
Yeah.
nonprofit for open research on AI.
Yeah.
Funny how when you
Hmm.
invent something great, it perverts incentives.
It
Well,
does.
Aaron, this has been fantastic. I had a great time. I
Yeah.
appreciate you coming on. If anybody wants to hear more about your company, find you, how do they find you? How do they reach out? What do they need to know?
Yeah. So you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Aaron Knape. And then the company, if you ever want to look it up, it's Amniscient, Amniscient. I know. Think omniscient, but amniscient. And it's higher in the alphabet, so better in the listings. But and then
I
you
was
can
thinking more amnesia, like, hey, we forget all of your video. It's getting wiped clean.
I need to think about that. I'll talk to the marketing team. But and you can find us. We're the only Amniscient, so you can find us on all of the socials. So LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram.
You rock, man. Well, thank you very much for coming on. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for the time, Matt.